everyone, and welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, and welcome to month 1 of the Spring 2021 Puzzle Mystery Sparkle and Shine Quilt. So this is my first time joining in with Cotton Cuts on their mystery quilt, and when they told me about it, I was very, very excited. I will tell you that they did gift me the pre-cut fabric for the size large quilt, and I will be doing it in the quartz colorway. However, I don't have all the patterns beforehand, so it is just as much a mystery to me as it is to you. So I do have the pattern for month 1. You should also have all of your cuts of fabric and the pattern for month 1, and we're gonna go over it together. So let me just show you what it looks like. This is your block. It is so cute. I love this colorway. I love how bright and poppy it is. And then we have a little bit of prints in there and some solids. I'm so excited about this. I'm so excited to see what this looks like in the end. This is gonna be fun. So if you're doing the large like I am, you're gonna have to do 4 blocks. If you're doing the small, I'm not sure how many blocks you need to do. But for the large, we're doing 4 of these blocks today. The coolest thing about this quilt along, you guys, is that you are not just buying the pattern. You are buying all of the pre-cut pieces of fabric. I did not cut any of this. They did not send me the fabric so I could cut it out myself and then make this. I didn't cut anything. They cut all of those triangles out for you. You don't even need a rotary cutter. I mean, we're gonna use the rotary cutter in the end to trim down the block if we need to, but this is like the quickest way to make a quilt. This is so great. So thank you so much, Cotton Cuts, for allowing me to participate in this and for gifting me the large quilt project. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Okay, so let's just dive in, shall we? Let's dive in and work on month 1 of the mystery quilt. All right, let's get started. Okay, so first let's talk about what comes with your month 1. So you should get a piece of paper like this with your colorway that tells you what fabric each thing is. So you see we have A, B, C, D, E, F. Those are all my fabric colors, and the pattern will be referring to fabric A, fabric D, so that way we all have the same pattern, but our colors might be different. So you're gonna get that, and then you're gonna get this cute little package. It says 1 on it. This is for your month 1, and look at this. So I already opened this. This isn't exactly how they packaged it, but I wanted to show you. Check this out. All of your pieces are already cut out. What the what? I'm sorry, some of you guys I know love cutting out your fabric, but I am not someone who does. So this is just fantastic. Look at that. It's all done. So here are all of our cuts of fabric for month 1. Like I said, I have enough cuts for 4 blocks. I know that's what we're gonna need for the larger quilt. If you're making the smaller quilt, it is possible you will be making less quilt blocks, but I'm not entirely sure. So let's just quickly go over a few of the supplies I'll be using today. For quilt blocks, I always like to use Aurifil 50 weight thread. It's just something I started with. I love to use it. You don't need to use cotton thread. You can definitely use polyester thread, but a thinner weight thread is what you're gonna wanna use for your quilt block. I'm using 7010 needles. These are Microtex. You don't need Microtex, it's just what I have. Universal 7010 would work fantastic. I have a bunch of pins. Pins are great for quilt blocks. I do prefer these over the little plastic clips. I've got my 10.5 inch by 10.5 inch creative grid ruler. This is what I used in my OklaRoots block party. And this is gonna work fantastic at cutting out the squares in the end. So just trimming this down. And then again, to make it easier, I have my rotating cutting mat. This allows me to just put the block on here, rotate it, trim it, and that way I'm not moving it around a whole lot. Okay, so the first thing I like to do is lay out my block like it has in the pattern. Now they're gonna have the diagram for exactly how this goes and which fabrics go where. So let's just quickly lay it out. Okay, so here's our block all laid out, and what we're gonna do is we're actually going to sew this together in sections of 3. So I'm gonna put my extra pieces up and out of the way. So we're gonna build the center and build the top and the bottom, and then we'll sew it all together. So like I said, I like to have it all laid out the way it's gonna be in the end, so that way when I'm placing things, I have everything exactly the way I want it. So let's start with our 2 A and D units. Go ahead and place these right sides together, and you'll notice that there is a very specific side you have to place these on. You can't do them the same way or else it won't turn out the way the pattern suggests. So that's why laying it out like this is really just helpful. You don't have to think about it too much. So I'm just pinning along the edge that we're going to be sewing. Okay, let's take these two A and D units to the sewing machine and sew along these pinned edges at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have your two AD units, lay them so that the wrong side of D is face up. Grab your iron, and I'm using a dry iron, meaning there's no steam in it, and then press that seam while it's closed, just like that. And now push up the D block and push the seam gently behind that D triangle, and then press from the front. Go ahead and do the same thing with your other A and D unit, getting that seam behind the D unit. And then you can flip this over and just press the back as well, just to help set that seam. Now let's place these back and make sure you have them in the right spot. There we go. So for me, the pinks go up top and the whites go down towards the bottom. So now let's work on the center strip. We've already got those 2/3 of the thing done. Let's start with the top here. Take your E and your F unit and fold them right sides together along the line on the right side of your square. There you go. And then pin together. And now let's sew along this edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So one thing you might notice when I'm sewing is that I have a scrap piece of fabric here. This is my leader fabric, and this allows me to sew without the tip of this fabric here from my quilt block getting jammed in the machine. This machine especially, the needle likes to push down these tips into the machine, and then the feed dogs kind of eat it up, and it's just a really disappointing mess. Having a leader piece of fabric like this that I sew first allows the string to pull on the tip of my quilt blocks so nothing gets jammed. I'm also using a stiletto, which is just a very pointy tool like this to help keep everything straight, since I don't want my finger to get too close to that needle. And when we're talking about a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, I have a little tick mark right here on the plate of my machine that is for a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, if I do a true 1/4 inch seam allowance, when I'm folding my fabric open, my block will be too small. So what I do is a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, which means you can see here's the tick, and then here's the edge of my fabric. It doesn't quite reach it. It's just a scotch to the left of that seam marker. And that means my seam allowance is just underneath a 1/4 inch. Not quite a 1/4 inch, but pretty close to it. Now take your unit and lay it so that the E, the square, is wrong side up. And we're going to press that seam that we just sewed. And then we're going to press E over the seam. So we want the seam to go behind the E unit. So you just gently finger press here, and then take your iron and just place it on top of it. You don't need to move it around, just place it. There you go. Now lift this up and let's press it from the back as well. So now we can take our unit and add it back to our little design here. Now let's work on the center. And once again, we're going to sew an F to an E, but this time it's going to be on the left. So just take that F unit and fold it right sides together along the left side of your E square. And then just pin that in place. And now let's take this to the machine and sew along the pinned edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, for this unit, we're going to press to the right. So the block on the right would be the square here. So just lay it so that the square is wrong side up. And let's press that seam. And then press the seam behind your square unit, nice and gentle. And you can give it a press on the back as well. So let's add this back to the center of our design. Now we're going to attach this B triangle over on the right. So let's just fold it on the right side, right sides together. Add some pins in place. And now you can sew along this seam at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, once again, we're going to press the seam towards the right side block. So for me, that is this B unit now. So I'm going to rotate this so that the B unit is wrong side up. Press it. And then press the seam behind it. Okay, you can go ahead and add this back in. Make sure you put it in the right way. There we go. So now we're going to attach this top EF unit to this middle unit here. So just line them up the way they go. Make sure you refer to the pattern if you get kind of confused. and then lay them right sides together. Now when we do this, the seam from one unit, the top unit, should be going in the opposite direction as the seam on the bottom unit. You see that? One's going towards the left, one's going towards the right. We want them to go in opposite directions, so all we have to do is slide those seams together, and they just kind of snug in with one another. They just bump up to each other, and that's how you get those really nice, perfect points. So I line up the center first, make sure that's all good, and then pin it. And then I'll pin the edges, because I'm most concerned with those centers matching. Now let's sew along this pinned edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have these sewn together, lay this so that the middle panel, the longer one, is wrong side up. And we're gonna press the seam to that. We wanna press the seam behind the panel that's the bottom. So the bottom panel here, just lay it so that the bottom panel is wrong side up. Give it a press, and then finger press the seam behind it. All right, here we go. Now you've got that little strip done. Now let's work on this little bottom bit here. Lay your B unit right sides together along the left edge of the A block, just like that. And then just pin along that edge to hold it in place. And now let's take this to the sewing machine and just sew along this pinned edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now lay your unit with the triangle B unit wrong side up. Give it a press on the seam, and then fold the B unit up so it covers the seam, and your seam is now going to be pressed behind the B triangle. Alrighty, all we have to do now is add this in. So just flip your bottom unit up towards the bottom edge of your center strip here. And just like before, we're going to nestle those seams together. Your seams should be pressed in opposite directions, so they just kind of bump up with one another, give each other a little kiss. So work on the middle first, pin that, and then pin out towards the edges. All right, go ahead and sew along this pinned edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now I'm actually going to press this seam towards the bottom so that way it'll nest really well with the triangle later. So I'm going to lay my block with that bottom piece wrong side up, and then just press along the seam, and then fold the bottom unit down so the seam is tucked underneath it, and then give it a gentle press from the top. Flip it over and press it from the back as well. All right, so now your quilt block is in 3 different sections. You just have to sew them all together. So let's start with this top corner over here. Let's just fold that right sides together. And even though it's at a bit of an angle, you should still be able to nest those seams. My triangle unit, the seam is going to the left, and my center unit, the seam is going towards the right. So let's pin that center first, and then we'll pin out towards the sides. Okay, let's sew along this edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now lay your unit so the triangles are wrong side up, and we're gonna press the seam behind that outer triangle unit. So again, just finger press it. Nice gentle press from the front. Flip it over and press it from the back as well. And last, let's add the bottom triangle unit. Isn't this fun? It's such a beautiful bright block. I love these colors. So I'm going to fold it right sides together and nest those seams. Make them give each other a little hug. All right, now let's sew along this seam at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Here we go. Once again, let's press it so that the seam will go behind the outer triangle. Just like that. Isn't that cute? It's so pretty. Flip it over. Give it a good press on the back. If you want to spray a little bit of starch, like some Best Press or something here, you can definitely do that just to get these seams to lie down nice and flat. And now the last thing I'm going to do is just trim up the block a little bit. So I'm going to put my block on my rotating cutting mat. Then I'm going to grab my ruler. Now my ruler is 10.5 inches by 10.5 inches, so that's obviously too big. So what I'm going to do is just center it, and I'm using the diagonal grid marks along those triangle diagonals. And I'm just trying to make sure 9.5 by 9.5 inches is in my block. It might be a little wonky. You might not get everything lined up exactly like you want. There might be some edges where it overhangs 9.5 and some edges where it doesn't quite reach. That's okay. All right, so once you're happy with how 9.5 inches by 9.5 inches fits in, hold it down, use your rotary cutter, and just slice along the sides just like that. Lift that up. And now all I have to do is turn this 180 degrees. I'm gonna lay my roller back down, and this time I'm gonna line up my 9.5 by 9.5 inch on the left and the bottom, since that's what I just trimmed. And that should give me as close to a perfect square as possible. This isn't quite perfect. There are some spots that don't quite reach the edge of the ruler, and that is perfectly fine. And there you go. You're just gonna make however many the pattern says. For me, I gotta make 2 more of these and I will be done with month 1. All right, there we go. Another block done. Isn't it adorable? I'm so excited to see your version too, because there's so many different colorways. I wanted to get them all. So if you're sewing along, make sure you use the hashtag OklaRootsTuts. I want to see your block. I don't think we have a hashtag officially for this quilt yet. I'm gonna talk to Cotton Cuts and see if we can get one, because it would be so cool to see everybody's versions. I want to see all the different colorway versions. If you're new to my channel, hi. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Jess. We make a lot of bags here. We make a lot of bags. If you're a bag maker and you've been around for a little while and you're starting your first, kind of like tiptoeing step into quilting, let me know down in the comments. If you're a quilter and you haven't made bags before and you're kind of like, let me go check out some of these other videos, let me know down in the comments. Either way, bags and quilts, I think they go together like peanut butter and jelly. I think it's just a great match, bags and quilts. So I hope you love making this quilt block. It is so cute. I am so excited to see what comes next. I'm so excited. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye.